When it comes to building a bullpen for 2023, the Mets already got their big fish, Edwin Diaz. What's next, though? Well, they still have at least 4 arms, maybe even 5 they have to sign in free agency. On the show today, we will be building a bullpen through free agency around Edwin Diaz.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Now, the New York Mets have a lot of work to do with their bullpen. Getting Edwin Diaz back was massive. You had to fill that closer role, and it would have been impossible to replace Edwin Diaz with anyone else, so they did the easiest thing they could do this offseason. They went to a player that wanted to be back, that spoke so glowingly about being a New York Met, who was worth every single penny of the contract they just gave him. They brought him in, and here you go. You're the best closer in baseball for the next 5 years. And usually that would be, okay, you're done. That's the big move you had to make. You got the lockdown reliever. You're all set, but that's not the case with this team. Because if you look at this bullpen right now, we've said it before, it's Edwin Diaz and Drew Smith. It's a 2-man bullpen at the moment. Now, to expand things out a little bit further, if we look at the 40-man roster, you got Diaz, you got Smith, as we mentioned. John Curtis sat on their 60-day IL all season. Just a name to throw out there. Yohan Lopez, we saw him a couple times. I don't think that you really look at him and say that's a definite answer for, back-end work to be a high-leverage reliever, but he's depth, as is Steven Nogasic, as is Sean Reed-Foley. And also you got Bryce Montes de Oca. Now, Montes de Oca has some of the nastiest stuff you're going to find. Absolutely electric, can hit 102 on the gun. I think Montes de Oca will solidify himself in the bullpen next year, but that does not really prohibit you from doing anything in free agency. You're not just saying, all right, we have to have a spot for this guy. That's a guy that earns it during the season. So with all that said, again, you're down to those two. The only other reliever that you can maybe say going into free agency is going to be on this team is Michael Givens. Now, his option is a little bit confusing. If you go to Spotrac, all it says is a $3.5 million option. Last year, he also made $3.5 million, and it says he was guaranteed $5 million over that one-year deal. So I believe that means there is a buyout attached here. I also had a listener that brought that to my attention as well. But based on looking over the contract details, I guess that's what it is. Usually it would say it there for us. It doesn't, but I would assume that's the case. So if there is a $1.5 million buyout on a $3.5 million mutual option, I'd imagine the Mets would have already told Givens the answer is yes, we would like to pick that up, but it's a mutual option. So for his sake, does he think he can do better than $2 million in free agency? And does he want to come back to the Mets, where he was ridiculed pretty good there after the deadline when he struggled? Eventually down the stretch, he actually pitched pretty good. And so I actually think that he would be a nice fit in this bullpen, but we'll see if that option gets picked up. For now, it's hard to count on that, though. So with that said, even if you say de Oca is one of them, or let's just say one of those two guys, either Givens or de Oca, you're going to say it's going to be eventually part of your 8-man bullpen. You still need to add 5 guys. I mean, a lot has to be done here to address this pen. You need at least 1 lefty. You need at least 2 more late inning guys. I mean, you can call Drew Smith a late inning high leverage guy if you want to, but I still think you want at least 2 more to join Edwin Diaz, the back of that bullpen. And then Trevor Williams was incredible in a swingman role. So can you find an answer to replace Trevor Williams? And also, let's not forget too, if you don't get Adam Ottavino or Seth Lugo back. Those guys were 1 and 2 out of the Mets bullpen in games and innings pitched. They each pitched about 65 innings. Ottavino got a couple of extra outs. So essentially 130 innings pitched by those two guys out of the bullpen. That's going to be really tough to try to replace here. Trevor May had a down year, overall ERA over 5, but he also dealt with injuries. And you look at down the stretch when he finally started to get his footing at the end of the season, a 1.93 ERA over his final 10 appearances and 15 strikeouts and 9 1/3 innings pitched. So which of those three guys do you want to bring back? I think that's where this conversation begins. Do you want to go with the guy that had the best season, and Adam Ottavino, or the guy in Trevor May who was pretty good in 2021, has a history of being a strong reliever with some really high-octane stuff, and is coming off of an injury-plagued down year where he might be able to be had pretty cheap? That's something to think about. Or Seth Lugo, who's been in this organization for a really long time, a valuable member of that bullpen, someone who, really, if you want to go back to 2019, has been the Mets' best reliever that they've counted on the most over these last couple of years. Can you let him walk? That's where we have to start this discussion. Which of those three guys do you bring back? Do you bring back all three? Do you bring back two? Do you bring back just one? We're going to get to that, though, after a quick word from our sponsors, because today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. The numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe Home Security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. I know because I actually use SimpliSafe in my own home. It gives me that sense of security knowing that no matter what happens, whether I'm home, whether I'm out, my belongings, my property, it is all protected because they have their 24/7 professional monitoring agents who always have your back. Their agents will call you the moment a threat is detected and dispatch police or first responders in case of an emergency, even if you're not home or can't be reached. SimpliSafe blankets your home in protection with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, also smarter ways to detect motion that only alerts you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that can instantly detect fires, floods, or other threats to your home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. Save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month for free. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. All right, so which of those three key relievers now that are on the market would you want back the most? Is it Adam Ottavino, is it Seth Lugo, or is it Trevor May? Based on performance this season, there is not a question which one you want back. Adam Ottavino. The question, though, is how much money is Adam Ottavino going to get paid off a season where his ERA was basically 2, and he had a nasty slider, and he actually did not walk the world like he has in the past. That's really where I'm at here. I mean, are you going to pay Adam Ottavino $8 to $10 million next season? How much is he going to get on the open market? I look around, and I mean, there's really not that many relievers that I would want over Ottavino when it comes to his stuff going into this free agent period. I mean, I think Adam Ottavino had a better year and has better stuff currently than we saw from some of these closers that are here in the market. Like, you look at Kenley Jansen, Craig Kimbrell, and Aroldis Chapman, they look a little bit more worn in that advanced age in their late 30s than Adam Ottavino does. But with that said, he's going to cost a lot. And you need a lot. You need to add a lot of arms here. So I do wonder if it's worth it to get Adam Ottavino or to spend the exact same amount of money and retain both Lugo and May. I kind of think that's where we are here. It's either get Ottavino and let those two walk, or spend that exact same money on both. You might even be able to get both for less. How much money is Trevor May going to make? And I think that's really the main takeaway I have here is I would definitely re-sign Trevor May. I think Trevor May is a no-brainer in the sense that, Here's a guy that I don't think at this point you're going to have to worry about the whole New York thing. Obviously, it'd be his third year pitching in New York. I don't think that's an issue whatsoever. And that can be for relievers. It really can. He's got to be better than he was this year. And I almost like to bet on guys who have a track record off of a down season. You just know he's going to be better next year. He's a real professional in every sense of the word with the way he takes care of his body, the way he conducts himself. I think he's a good character guy in that clubhouse. I really, of the three, because of the price tag, which I think is going to be diminished, I like Trevor May over both Ottavino and Lugo because I think those guys can really get paid more. I also think that Lugo might be a better bet than Ottavino based on age and also, based on the seasons they just had. We were just doing our rankings for Just Baseball. We're going to do the top free agents at each position. So me, Arm Layton, Jack McMullen, our editorial team, we were going through all the free agents today and kind of hashing it out where we would rank these guys. And Seth Lugo ultimately, I believe, grabbed our last spot of our top 10 relievers, but it was close and there's a lot of guys who could have bumped them off. Adam Ottavino is a lot more comfortably on that list. And so I do think that other teams are going to view Ottavino as a guy that they could target to maybe even close, and he could get paid more, where Lugo might not enjoy such a lucrative market. The only thing that could stand in the way of Lugo returning, though, on top of just the other offers he could command, is if there is a team out there that wants to let him start, and if that is still something that he's interested in. We really don't know there. Obviously, that has been a big draw for him in the past. I would hope at this point that he's accepted that he is just a relief pitcher and a pretty damn good one. So right now, when I look at those three guys, to me, Trevor May is the one that I would bring back for sure. And I think I'd go Lugo over Ottavino simply because of the cost and also because I really want the Mets to get one of Rafael Montero or Robert Suarez. Here we are where Montero, spoiler alert, when it comes to Just Baseball, we got him atop our list of relievers. Isn't that crazy? Rafael Montero, now that Diaz is gone, being the top free agent reliever on the market. You say that's nuts, but he pitched to a 2.37 ERA and then went into the playoffs and a 1.93 ERA in the biggest stage. Strikeout rate remained consistent, 9.6 per 9 in the regular season and in the postseason. He had a whiff percentage on his fastball this year of over 35%. That is ridiculous. Locating that fastball up in the zone. So crazy to see a former Met establish themselves as a reliever. And I don't think it's likely the Mets sign him because I just can't imagine that Montero had fond memories of pitching in New York and wants to go back there. I think he'd probably like to either stay in Houston or find another more small market situation where he can thrive. But he's worth mentioning. Suarez is my guy, though. I think Robert Suarez should be the top free agent reliever the Mets go after this year. He just throws gas, and that's something that you could bank on. A 2.27 ERA. He struck out 11.5 batters per 9 this year. Did not allow a run in the first two playoff series the Padres had. That was, of course, first against the Mets. Gave up 2 home runs in the NLCS, one of them being the big one to Bryce Harper that decided the series. But I don't knock him for that. It was an incredible piece of hitting by Harper. Again, that fastball will play next year for sure. Younger guy. I like Robert Suarez to be the 8th inning guy to Edwin Diaz next year, especially because we just watched him do it in the playoffs. So he's not going to be faced by the moment. I love that addition. Now, some other names that we can discuss here. You got Michael Fulmer, another former Met, although he never did actually play a game in a Mets uniform. He was the top prospect that headlined the Yoenis Cespedes trade 2015. Then he went on to win Rookie of the Year in 2016 for the Tigers. Was a starting pitcher early in his career. Now he's converted to the bullpen. His slider is disgusting, so that's an option, although injuries have been a real issue for Fulmer. So how much do you count on him? You got David Robertson, who was our big target that we were discussing ad nauseum heading into the deadline. Never happened. I'm sure the Mets will have interest again. 2.40 ERA this season. Only allowed 1 run across 8 playoff appearances. So he was pretty solid there as well. Has all the experience and has experience pitching in New York. You have to love that as a possibility. Although I will say something about him when I saw him in playoff games, even though he had all the results you would have wanted, I just didn't completely have confidence in him, which is weird. But something about not having that high velocity stuff, you always kind of wonder if he's off, will he get hit hard? But he'd still be a great fit at the back end of the Mets bullpen. With all that said, when I look at all of these guys and you're trying to find the lockdown late inning relievers, Suarez is my number one target here. Ottavino, I guess, would still probably be, if we're just talking about to be the eighth inning guy, maybe he's still number 2 for me. I just think the price tag's going to get a little bit crazy. Then you got May and Lugo, who I'd bring back, and Robertson. To bring back those or to sign those 4 would be a big task for the Mets, but I would love it if they ended up getting Robertson, Lugo, May, and Suarez. Right now, in the purpose of today's podcast and building out a Mets bullpen, I'm going to keep it to just Lugo, May, and Suarez as the additions, along with Diaz and Smith. So that brings us to 5 in that Mets bullpen. So, who else should they target? They still need a lefty and ideally a long man to fill in that Trevor Williams role. We'll get to that, though, in just a minute. First, though, another word from our sponsors. Adding a left-handed reliever to the Mets bullpen, how important is it? They didn't really do much when it comes to that this year. It was Joely Rodriguez or bust. They just stuck with it, and they rode it till the wheels came off. They could bring him back. I'd like to see them go in a different direction. And going through the candidates, you got Aroldis Chapman, which I think is probably going to price himself out of going to the Mets. Who knows? Chapman may still see himself as a closer and be looking for some team that'll let him close out games. And I'm sure there are sub 500 teams that would do that. Some of these guys, K-Rod always wanted to be a closer. Some of these guys just like to pitch in the ninth. You got Zach Britton. You got Will Smith. Taylor Rogers, another guy that had some closing experience but was dreadful this season. Andrew Chafin and Brad Hand. Chafin's the guy for me, though. I wanted him last offseason. I'm glad he elected for free agency again from the Tigers. And he would just be the perfect fit because he's both. He's a guy that's great against lefties, and you can count on him in the late innings. The whiff percentage on his slider is a thing of beauty. Look at his career. Over 50% whiffs over each of the last 5 seasons. When he has thrown his slider dating back to 2018, if he throws it, there's a 50-50 chance that guys are going to swing through it. And this year, that number jumped up to a career high 60.4%. So now you got better than a coin flip's odds that if a batter swings at his slider, they're swinging through it. So that is something that you just would love to see in the Mets bullpen. 3.23 career ERA, 1.83 in 2021, 2.83 this year. If you get Chafin, now you look at the long man situation, and there's a couple guys that I was looking at, and I went to starters. Starters that you could sign off of down years, or just guys that you can put in and say, all right, you're going to be at the back of the bullpen. And the 2 guys that jumped out to me over everyone else was Michael Lorenzen. Made 18 starts this year. He wanted to be a starting pitcher. That's why he signed with the Angels. Would he want to start again? Probably. Could the Mets have a thin enough rotation, or at least have an opportunity where he could look at a chance to either play for a good team no matter what, but to compete with like a Tyler or McGill for the last spot in the rotation? I don't know. I don't know how much he'd be open to it, but if he was, considering his success previously as a reliever at the Reds, I'd actually really like that addition. Joe Ross was another name that jumped out to me, 4.26 career ERA, injury-plagued year, a guy that has pitched in this division with the Nationals. I would love him as a swingman. You bet on him. You say, come over here. You maybe give him incentives based on innings pitched or even starts if he fancies himself that way. Tie some incentives to both of them. But Joe Ross, I could see end up filling that Trevor Williams role really well. Trevor Williams obviously would be great to have back. I just think he pitched so well this season that there's going to be teams out there that would let him start. Beyond that, Erasmo Ramirez, a 2.92 ERA at the Nationals this year. That is just straight pitching in garbage time on a bad team. When the opposition scores 8 runs off Patrick Corbin in the first 3 innings, they can let their foot off the gas when they face Erasmo Ramirez as that bridge guy. So, or that innings eater that comes in after your blown up starter. I'd still love him back though. I love the Erasmo Ramirez. That's a guy that you wonder if he gets a major league deal off of a good season, or he still has to grind it out with a minor league deal and an invite to camp. But I'd take any of those 3 guys, and I think really that long man will probably be someone that we're not even picturing at the moment. But I guess if I had to pick from the 3, Joe Ross would be the answer. So let's just call it Joe Ross and look at the bullpen I have now built through free agency. You got Edwin Diaz, Robert Suarez, Trevor May, Seth Lugo, Andrew Chafin, and Drew Smith. So right there, that's your core 6. Now, for your other relievers, if Givens comes back, you'd have him. You'd also potentially have Montes de Oca factoring in, and then you would have Joe Ross as that other option. That's where I would start here. There's going to be other guys that'll come into camp. We've discussed Grant Hartwig a little bit the last couple of days, or last couple of weeks, I should say, on Friday Farm Reports. He's an option. There's more in the farm system. I don't have him listed, so it's not off the top of my head. Eric Orzi is the guy I was thinking of. I had to look that one up. I could not place him. Didn't have the best season in AAA, but he was close to making it. He did have a lot of strikeouts. Bottom line, though, there's going to be other pitchers that will factor into the mix. If you have 6 relievers you can trust going to spring training, you feel pretty good about it. And that core 6 that I mentioned, one more time, Edwin Diaz, Robert Suarez, Trevor May, Seth Lugo, Andrew Chafin, and Drew Smith would be a fantastic start. You got late inning relievers, you have a lefty, you have the best closer in baseball. I think that would be more than enough to start building your bullpen. And obviously that's something that will progress throughout the season with guys getting called up, and also with the always present rumors when it comes to trading for relievers. You always want to do that at the deadline, and maybe you want to do more than just get a Michael Givens like they did this past season. But regardless, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, hosted by Peter Bukowski. Locked On Sports Today is where you want to go for game reactions, breaking news, the take of the day. You can find Locked On Sports Today on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get podcasts.